That's great. Am I allowed to walk on the
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Whatever you want to do.
Great. Yeah. All right. So my name is Wenyi. This is I'm a biology. I'm a graduate student affiliated with biology and also Florida Museum. I'm currently working with Scott Robinson on the impact of plantation forestry on the bird community in southwestern China. I will be sharing some results on my preliminary results on my third chapter, which focuses really on the body condition of these birds and how the body condition of these birds can be affected by this massive land use change, which is plantation forestry. This particular species, Alder-leaf Birch, is a really understudied species, but it has shown some promising potential to conservation. So it's really important for us to evaluate how good of a candidate to conservation it really is. All right, so, this. All right, yeah, just a little bit of history about plantation forestry in China before we really jump into the bird part. In the last century, China was developing super fast. We are just really a country that develops very fast and still is right now. But last century it was particularly fast. We were over harvesting a lot of our resources, in particular the forest. This led to many natural disasters, including sandstorms, droughts, and flooding events. These flooding events in 1998 really killed a lot of people, about 4,000. So the government attributed these problems to deforestation. The government decided to start these forest rehabilitation programs, one of which is the one that I'm dealing with. Oh, should I get rid of this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, one of these programs is called Grain for Green. So the government would subsidize farmers with cash or a crop. In exchange, the farmers would plant these timber trees on sloping land, in particular, to get rid of the water, the erosion and water loss. Now, this is about 3 decades, 2.5 decades after the initiation of these programs. We have a lot of plantation forests. I think China currently leads the world in this plantation forest area. Have to wait for another 5 years before some new statistics become available. With the FAO, I think that's the organization that's doing all the tallying. Every 5 years, new data. But I think China probably still leads the world in this plantation forest area. We have planted a lot of China fir and eucalyptus, both of which, as you probably already know, are very bad for biodiversity. And I just came from a trip to Madagascar, and so just seeing the huge tracts of eucalyptus there, knowing that this country could have been teamed with biodiversity, with lemurs, with bungas, but instead just seeing a lot of eucalyptus, which was pretty sad. But yeah, anyway, the programs as a whole are pretty good for these original goals, which is alleviating the soil erosion and water loss. But biodiversity really is, for the most part, these timber trees are not as effective. But we have this one. This is the species that I'm studying. It's called Alder-leaf Birch. Right? The leaves really do look like the alder leaf, the red alder, or I don't know what other alder species we have here, but the leaf shape is very similar. This is a pioneer species, meaning that if you were to let the landscape regenerate on its own, then this tree would be among the first species to colonize a clear-cut birch maple. So it's a native species to southern China, and it has been widely planted as a timber species for plantation forestry. Someone suggested that it has conservation potential about 10 years ago, but really nobody has really paid attention to this suggestion. And that's why we have very limited knowledge about this timber species, Alder-leaf Birch. What's important to point out is that what's really important to point out is that they have these loose barks and soft leaves. Both characteristics are very good in terms of attracting insects, right? And therefore also attracting a lot of insect-eating birds. However, as good as they are in attracting insect-eating birds, they are just, it's still an artificial forest. You have a pretty developed, well-developed understory, but the mid-story part, as you can see here, it's completely just gone. There's nothing, not really a lot of habitat structure or vegetation structure, right, and vegetation complexity. Anyway, so earlier this year, my colleagues and I published a paper about, might be the first paper about how the bird communities are doing in these birch plantations. And it seems like, the birch plantations are, compared to natural forests, they are supporting insect eating birds just, as equally as the natural forests, which is pretty good. And more than that, these birch plantations also support mixed species bird flock participants. If you know anything about Southeast Asia birds, or particular Chinese southern China birds, a large proportion of the bird community join these mixed species bird flocks. So these birch plantations really are supporting a lot of birds. Now, before I talk about my research questions, I just want to introduce this study region a little bit, because I know most of us are probably not very familiar with this part of the world, right? It's very close to Myanmar. Why is it really important to study birds here? First of all, it's really relevant, especially for birch plantations. This is really the place with the largest area of birch plantations in China, and I guess in the world. And at the same time, it has a tremendous diversity. Well, nothing compared to Colombia or Peru, but it's quite diverse in Asia. And this high bird species diversity can be shown by this recent study in this year. So this study sampled birds along this mountain or latitudinal gradient along this Galigong Mountain, which is a mountain range that my study region is a part of. What they found is that, so my study sites are circled in red. The Yingjiang County is where I did the study. It is really the place with the highest number of bird species. As you can see here, almost on the right, almost 700 species of birds can be found. And I think, based on my knowledge birding there, I think it's might be an understatement, just because eBird is banned in China, and a lot of people don't even upload and their anyway. Also showing you the birds here more visually. These are the birds that I've worked with for this chapter. I would usually talk about all of these birds, but I think we're not a particularly birdie crowd, and also I don't want to spend too long. But here are some cool ones. Finally using the laser pointer. So these laughing thrushes here, I really enjoy them. Think of them as the brown thrashers here, but you have, instead of one, brown thrashers are usually solitary or in pair, you have 10 or 20 of these large birds, very noisy. It's really, really fun to watch them. Our mist nets are a little bit small, the mesh size is small, but every once in a while we do catch these laughing thrushes. Also have some of these musky capitated old world flycatchers, also pretty nice. Yeah, and this bird I really want to point out here. I think I'm blocking it for the audience here. This parrotbill. It's can't even remember its English name. Anyway, this is a bird that is difficult to handle. It has a really short neck and has a very thick bill, right? As you can see here. When you are handling this bird, you can control it really well. I mean, it can turn its head and just bite you. And it hurts really bad. Anyway, so really, the point I want to make here is that this really is a biodiversity hotspot. And also, we are, I think another thing that's really good about working in China is that we are a very xenophilic xenophilic, sorry, xenophilic, not xenophobic, xenophilic culture, especially if you're a foreigner. You come here in these remote villages, people are just very curious about you. And, oh wow, this is the forest. So people, it's this curiosity is very friendly. I think most people would enjoy that. Um, I don't get that because I'm in Chinese, but when my advisor traveled with me, he really enjoyed this. These school kids just came and they asked me if we can take a picture with Scott. Yeah, of course, and we just happily took a picture together. All right, so yeah, here we've seen how relevant and also how biologically diverse this region is, right? And now it's time to talk about these research questions. Specifically, I'm asking how do biotic and abiotic factors affect the body condition of birds? By biotic factors, I mean age, sex, breeding condition. And abiotic factors, I mean land use type, climatic factor, and seasonality. But with the focus being land use type, really, the birch, the plantation forestry, birch is really the thing I want to figure out. But also to look at how birch plantations, how important of a factor it is relative to the other factors. Yeah, so why am I interested in this question? I'm totally blank. Yes, yeah, that's right. Sorry. It, it seems like these birch plantations are supporting a lot of species from the previous study, right? Especially the insect-eating ones. So on a community level, maybe these birch plantations are doing just fine. But what about population on a population level? And especially for species that not only eat insects but also um, other food resources. How are their populations doing? So I don't want to spend a lot of time just monitoring these populations longitudinally for many years. Never be able to graduate from the PhD. So I use the body condition as a proxy for the potential long-term impact on these birds. And yeah. To answer these questions, we did a lot of mist netting at 13 sites across. Get rid of this. Okay, over here. Right. So at 13 sites across 3 different land use types, comparing birch plantations with mature forests and also young forests that are about the same age as these birch plantations. So young forest is really important because if you don't grow these birch plantations, then the landscape will eventually look like the young forest. So it's kind of an alternative outcome for the land management. And I also did this in both the breeding and also the non-breeding season. For those of you who don't know too much about mist netting, this is what it looks like when a bird is caught in a mist net. It's relatively safe. These nets are very flexible, and we are also been trained for very long to how to safely handle these birds. So what we do is just check these nets every 30 minutes and extract these birds from the mist nets. Okay, and this is a very typical our field camp. We extract these birds from the mist net and we bring them to these tables, and we process birds on these tables. Oh yeah, and I really have to mention that my field work really would not be possible. Any of this would not be possible if it weren't for this collaboration with the I call them the lousy team. They are ectoparasite specialists, and especially they are specialized in lice. That's where the lousy comes in. But they were really interested in collecting lice and hippopotid flies, mice, and ticks. So we were able to collaborate every time we were in the field. They're also very good at setting up nets and extracting birds. So I have a lot of hand to help, which is very good. So the process is you have you have a parrot bill here and you put it in these Ziplocs. And you have these cotton balls filled with ethyl acetate, and that you fumigate the birds for. Well, first of all, you got to check if the birds are doing okay. If they're not, then you just let it go. And the safety comes first, right? But if the bird is doing okay, then you fumigate the bird, depending on the size of the bird. For this one, maybe 15 minutes. And then you take the bird out of the ziplock and you ruffle the bird. If there were any lice, they would fall off the bird because they would be dead, right? Yeah, so that's how the process goes. We also just recently visited them in Guangzhou, so we were able to look at its lice really under the microscope. It was very cool, but also some people might find it disgusting. I find it actually visually very appeasing to look at them. Yeah, so this really, you can see that these lice eat feathers, right? These black things, these dark dusty stuff filled with feathers. That's actually how you identify a louse in the field. This is what our field work looks like. This is a typical day of our field work. You can see that Bella and I, Bella is my fiance, and she was helping me with my field work as well. A tremendous help. We were processing birds in the back, and these three people, the parasite people, in the front. And this one, my collaborator, she went to where I was to pick up the bird that I had finished processing. I passed the bird to her, and she's checking if the bird is doing all right. She's putting the bird into this ziplock, ready for fumigation. There's already one bird here being fumigated, and Alex here is also preparing. And suddenly, all of us, we are birders. Well, four of us are. We really, not only are we interested in the research aspect, but also just the fun aspect of birds. And this guy just, because his work has not started yet, so he started birding with surveying the landscape. What's happening there? He finds a bird he cannot identify. He calls me, and I look at the bird, and it comes here. What is it, right? But as you can see, I still have a bird in the bag, so I still have to process, get to work. So I can't spend too much time birding. Unlike him, his work has not started. So he's preparing for his camera, and he also likes taking pictures. And he also uploads these vectors to eBird. And all of a sudden, he finds another bird. He calls Wang. Wang, thinking in this particular case, they found a black-throated laughing thrush, and Wang had not seen that bird. So they just, these people just went off. Look at the bird. Alex here, Alexandra Grossi, she is a very, very good helper in the field, but she is not into birds. So she's just always there working. Never being distracted by these foreign birds, right? As you can see, there are more birds being fumigated, right? So we really have this assembly line, me being the processor and Bella's scriber, and these three are they do their thing. Yeah, it's a really good team. I like to say that this is really not a typical day of our field work. This was in the winter season. We tend to catch a lot more birds than that. And we really don't have time to watch birds usually. It's because most of these Chinese birds are highly social. They form these large conspecific groups. So you don't just catch one bird. Usually you catch a whole lot in the mist nets. And if you don't have a team, it's really difficult to deal with these birds when they come all together. Yeah. All right, so here we're going to talk about the stats part, the data part. Right. I have my abiotic factors highlighted in blue. The land use types, 3 mature forests, young forests, and birch plantations. Seasonality, so because I sample these birds in both the breeding and also the non-breeding season. And temperature, rainfall, these are variables that I got from a website, a database, and here also 3 biotic factors: age, sex, and breeding condition. So I'm using these 7 factors to explain the body condition, which is calculated by this formula that I will explain later. All right. So first of all, temperature and rainfall. I got these data from I can't remember the acronym, but JASDISC. It's part of NASA, or could be wrong. But this data set is really good. It's longitudinal, it's long term from 2000 to now, and it's really high resolution. And what I mean by that is I could get daily temperature and rainfall and humidity and everything, radiation and stuff, for sites that are only maybe 2 or 3 kilometers away from each other. So that's really cool. I can extract these data for specific to my sites, which are some of them are pretty close to each other. Yeah. And another variable that I want to highlight a bit more is age. A lot of people might be asking, how do you age these birds? Are older birds bigger or are the younger birds smaller? Not necessarily. We look at the wings of these birds a lot. We spend a lot of time looking at these birds' wings. Look for things, multiliness, well, these are the terminology, but basically look for characteristics indicating whether this bird is a young bird or an old bird. Right? It's important to point out that we always use a combination of methods, not just one, but looking at all of the evidence that we could find to assign an age for a bird. And here, I want to highlight 2 of my undergraduate mentee. One of them is Olivia Spinola, and she is working on the molt dataset. This is a side project of my main the body condition thing. What's good about these banding data is that you can really have these side projects and also this mentorship with undergraduate students, which is really cool. But yeah, so I'm not going to explain what preformative molt means, but it's something that in Europe, in the US, and Central South America, people have heavily studied this, but just not much for Asia, and not in particular for these resident birds. We really don't know. Well, I don't want to say anything, but we really know very little about how these birds molt, how many feathers they play, and when do they molt, stuff like that. And this kind of life history knowledge is super important. So yeah, Olivia is working on that. And I also have another undergraduate mentee who has just graduated last semester, in spring semester, I believe, Delaney Cassidy. She is working on how reliable iris color is in Asian birds. As you can see, these 6 birds, they all have different iris color stages, right? So you go from from top to bottom. The iris color change from gray, brown to red, right? And what she found when you were, well, so yeah, the ones with darker iris or redder iris tend to be older birds, whereas the ones with gray or brown tend to be the younger ones. Yeah. All right. So now I'm going to explain this formula. This formula that I use to calculate body condition. We've been talking about this the whole time, but I really haven't defined what body condition is. In ornithology or in most wildlife biology, body condition, there are many ways to define to measure body condition, but it's basically referring to the amount of energy storage or fat storage in your body, energy reserve. But traditionally, people use just body mass to calculate body condition. But you can see that there is a problem, right? Because bigger birds are going to be heavier, but not necessarily because they have more fat or energy reserve. It could be that they're just bigger, they have bigger bones, and so you need to take into account that. And this is what this scaled mass index is supposed to do. It's supposed to consider the effect of the structural size. So not only you are separating the effect of the structural size and just considering the amount of energy or fat reserve. For this, you need to have a linear measurement of that's supposed to represent the structural size of the bird. It depends on the bird. Sometimes tarsus might be better, sometimes wing port, sometimes bill length. A lot of these birds were molting during the non-breeding season, and I could not get the wing data for all of the birds. That's why there are three alternatives. And I built these linear mixed, or sometimes not mixed, but linear mixed models to answer this question. Everything you see highlighted in gray here, these are the things that in some cases, I did not include. For example, sometimes they're only, the site is not an important factor, I'll just remove it. Or sometimes I've only caught one bird in the breeding season, but not in the non-breeding season. So for age, right, that's why they're highlighted in gray. But a full model would include everything here. All right, so let's see some results. I was able to include 28 species. I think 5 or 6 of them had smaller sample size, so I might consider removing them in the end. I need to find that threshold, the golden threshold. Well, how many birds you have to catch to be able to include it, right? But of these 28 species, land use type had a significant impact on body condition in 7 of them. But what's sad about this is that for all these 7 birds, it was consistently negative, right? Which means that birds in these birch plantations, well, at least these 7 species, had lower body condition. Whether it's comparing birch to young forest or comparing birch to mature forest, lower body condition. And yeah, there is no other direction, so that's really, really consistent, right? Another thing that's a little surprising is that age had a significant effect in 4 species. Actually, maybe 5. I was just reanalyzing my data, but this pattern is also very consistent. The younger birds tend to have higher body condition than older birds. But younger birds, these are not the birds that are in the nest or just juveniles. And those birds are, of course, they're going to have better body condition because they were just fed a lot of food in the nest. These are what I would call subadults or immatures. So they have, morphologically, they pretty much look like an adult. They don't have that extra fat from the nest, but they still have very high body condition compared to adult birds. Another thing is this breeding condition had a positive effect on the body condition of forebirds. I really thought it would be the other way around because breeding is something that's really energy expensive, right? But these birds that are breeding, they had higher body condition compared to the birds that weren't. And lastly, sex. Not lastly, penultimately, sex had a significant impact on 4 species. And males tend to have lower body condition than females. This is lastly, these climatic factors, seasonality or temperature, rainfall, they had much fewer effects on body condition, and also these effects were not, the direction of these effects were not consistent. Okay, so to summarize everything, I'm interpreting these results now. Birch plantation may not provide enough support to some of these species, even though there are only 7 species with significant impact. The direction was consistently negative for birch. This is maybe due to this lack of food resource variety. Birch plantations have a lot of insects, invertebrates in general, but not other like nectar or fruit. We really don't see anything like that in the birch plantations. And the higher body condition in younger birds is mostly because they did not participate in the breeding activity. When we were catching these birds in the non-breeding season, it was just right after the adult bird had finished breeding. So it could be that these adult birds were just very tired, very gassed from the breeding, right? But the younger birds, they did not have to go through that. The higher body condition during breeding, maybe that was really counterintuitive, but it could be just gonadal development, right? Males have enlarged testes, right? And It could also be that these birds were filling, getting a lot of food before they go into breeding. So what we're seeing here is actually that they have this extra energy that they had just stored. This sex-related difference in body condition, I'm not super sure, but I think it might be related to the behavioral differences between males and females. Maybe the males, they more aggressive toward each other, not only in the breeding season but also in the non-breeding season, and also they tend to travel maybe further than the females. All right. Well, I'm gonna end the presentation here and thank my funding agencies and also thank the field crew. These people really very helpful in the field, and especially you can see here the ectoparasite people. Right? And also my advisor and my policy advisor, who is not really my advisor but helped me a lot. But this guy here, Yang Yu, he helped me a lot with figuring out the logistics, which is really a large proportion of doing field work in China. You have to figure out your logistics. Yeah, with that, I will take questions.